All right, we're starting back at the top of the page of K33.htm file. Paleontology, a study of fossils relative to the origin of life, points to a worldwide flood. Introduction, Marvin Lubenow. Bones of Contention. Lots of good stuff in that book. The survival of the fittest has a flop side. It is the death of the less fit. For evolution to proceed, it is as essential that the less fit die as it is that the more fit survive. If the unfit survived indefinitely, they would continue to infect the fit with their less fit genes. The result is that the more fit genes would be diluted and compromised by the less fit genes, and evolution could not take place. Of course, what do you do with the apes? The concept of evolution demands death. Death is thus as natural to evolution as it is foreign to biblical creation. The Bible teaches that death is a foreigner, a condition superimposed upon humans and nature after creation. Death is an enemy. Christ has conquered it, and he will eventually destroy it. Their respective attitudes toward death reveal how many light years separate the concept of evolution from biblical creationism. It is possible to determine whether the concept of human evolution is a scientific theory or a philosophy. Okay, what is science? Well, basically, raw data. Observability, can you observe it? Falsifiability, can you refute it in some way? Use an alternative possibility to determine whether or not something is true or not. You look at the opposing points of view and see if they have any greater validity. And repeatability, can we look at this thing? Oh, apparently creation only happened, the earth only happened once, so far as we can say, unless you want to go back billions of years, but nobody's that old. So if it is a scientific theory, it must be capable of being falsified. Since human evolution is alleged to be an historic process, the evidence for it, or the falsification of it, must come from the fossil record. For instance, if Homo erectus people persisted long after they should have died out or changed into Homo sapiens, the concept of human evolution would be falsified. If one could show that fossils indistinguishable from modern humans existed long before they were supposed to exist, according to the process of evolution, this also would falsify the concept. If human evolution is truly a scientific theory, the fossil record shows that it has been falsified. The fact that the evidence is ignored or disguised indicates that the concept of human evolution is a philosophy that is perpetuated in spite of and independent of the facts of the human fossil record. Well, the whole fossil record. It may, of course, be granted that the principle of stratigraphic correlation, in other words, geologic timetable based on a presupposed idea of when living things once lived, and then dating the rock formations, that the fossils of those once alive living things are contained in according to those presuppositions. It may, of course, be granted that the principle of stratigraphic correlation by means of fossils in terms of the accepted presupposed sequence is supported by much evidence. Any theory, well, I don't like the word theory. I want to put in there model, because theory means it's observable, scientific. But it's not. It's a model based on some evidence that's scientific and some that's presuppositional, theoretical, not there. So any theory or model that could have attained almost universal acceptance by geologists is obviously not founded solely on wishful thinking. On the other hand, it is possible that some other theory may explain that same evidence more effectively. They ignore creation record, catastrophism. This process has often been true in the history of science whenever a new generalization has been developed to incorporate within its framework not only the fact of supporting the previous theory, but also those facts contradicting the previous theory. And in spite of the general validity of the standard and accepted geologic stratigraphic succession, i.e., the order of the fossils' appearances in rock formations, but not their ages, just the order. But there isn't a strict order either. All over the world they have contradictions, so many that it's a joke. But there are many exceptions, as I said, and contradictions to it, which have been very unsatisfactorily explained in terms of the accepted theory. One prominent geologist says, because of the sterility of its concepts, historical geology, which includes paleontology and stratigraphy, there's an R there, stratigraphy, has become static and unreproductive. Current methods of delimiting intervals of time, which are the fundamental units of historical geology and of establishing the chronology, are of dubious validity. And these methods used at the time of this quotation in 1948 are still used today and taught in our classrooms. So I'm quoting here something that was quoted in 1948, and it's still used today. Wow. Worse than that, the criteria of correlation, the attempt to equate in time or synchronize the geological history of one area with that of another, which almost always have irreconcilable differences, are logically vulnerable. This is not the way it always is everywhere. Yet the geology textbooks in college, that's what it says. The findings of historical geology are suspect because the principles upon which they are based are either inadequate, in which case they should be reformulated, or false, in which case they should be discarded. Most of us refuse to discard or reformulate. And the result is the present deplorable state of our discipline. When a fossil is found in a stratum to which it theoretically does not belong, several means of explaining the discrepancy are possible. If it is supposed to be older than the containing bed, it can be said to have been redeposited from an earlier eroded deposit, or to indicate the survival of its particular species longer than had been previously believed. If it is supposed to be younger than its stratum, it can be again explained as due to the reworking and mixing of two originally distinct deposits, or else as showing that the animal dates from earlier antiquity than previously thought. Often, discovery of such an anomalous fossil has been deemed sufficient to justify redating the entire formation. And then all the other fossils that are belonging there don't belong to conform to the supposed age of the particular fossil. With so many speculative devices conveniently at hand for reconciling these discrepancies, it is obvious that all but the most flagrant cases of mislocation can be quickly and easily explained, or covered up maybe, in such a manner. It is still possible to ignore them on the assumption that there must have been some mistake in the field, evidence, or its description. A lot of times they'll do that. One geologist will come back after another and fix everything, and then you throw out the other books. When an entire formation seems out of place in the standard sequence on the basis of either lithologic or paleontologic evidence, it is not so easy to conceive explanatory mechanisms. However, as we have seen, these cases are usually handled in terms of supposed great earth movements, faulting, folding, thrusting, and so on. We've discussed that. How a rock formation can go on for 40 miles, and one uplifts, and the other slams down, and the other slams back over it, and there's no violent indicator. Wow. So, faulting, folding, thrusting, and so on, whether or not there is any actual physical evidence of such movement, doesn't matter. We'll just say this is the way it is. As already noted, systems of rocks are quite often found with the intervening systems omitted. Even more paradoxically, formations are often found actually in reverse order, with presumed older rocks lying on top of younger rocks. In the first case, the missing rocks are falsely accounted for as periods of erosion. In the second, the theory of the thrust fault is commonly and erroneously advanced, according to which rocks, which originally were flat-lying and contiguous, in other words touching, were suddenly separated by a vertical or sloping fault, the rocks on one side of the fault rising with respect to those on the other. Probably sounds violent to me. Then the upper rocks were thrust horizontally over the lower. In time, the top layers were eroded away, leaving then only the older rocks on the bottom of the faulted portion, resting on top of the younger rocks over which they were supposed to move. A lot of supposition and guesswork. Movie making, that's what they do. Often this process will require more force in one place than is known possible. There has also never been found any evidence of the exertion of such a gigantic force, such as ground down rock pieces all along where the force was exerted to move gigantic mountain-sized sections of rock. I just was talking about that. As we have already pointed out, if such phenomena as this have ever taken place on the Earth, it is thereby proved that the principle of uniformity is invalid as a guiding geologic principle, since there are demonstrably comparable phenomena now occurring. But, on the other hand, is it not possible that all of the many paradoxes and exceptions with which the geological formations abound, many of them, just innumerable, can be better explained by means of some other principle than that of uniformity and evolution? What do you think that is? Worldwide flood. Anomalies, the whole worldwide flood scenario is an anomaly. Every time two bodies of water clash together, they have different stuff in them, and they deposit it according to whatever is there. And then something comes back over it and deposits more. How come that more is on top of the one that's supposed to be on top of the other one? Because the waves keep coming back and forth. Waves go back and forth, right? Not hard, right? So, except for these philosophies, there is no reason to be greatly surprised when fossil is found out of place, or even when an entire formation is out of place. The concept of catastrophe, which we have already seen to be necessary to account for many of the geologic formations, may quite possibly suffice, not only to account for the deposition of the rocks and organisms in their usual sequences, but also for occasional deposits in unusual orders. Yeah, lots of water will do that. For in spite of all the devices which are available for harmonizing the contradictory cases with the accepted system, there still exist many, many examples which seem much more difficult to explain in terms of uniformity and evolution than in terms of creation and subsequent catastrophes. Robin S. Allen, Geological Correlation and Paleoecology. These big words, and it's usually fantasy. Another biblical implication of the flood account is that great numbers of living creatures must have been entrapped and buried in the swirling sediments. Under ordinary processes of nature, as now occurring, fossils, especially of land animals and even marine vertebrates, are very rarely formed. The only way that they can be preserved long enough for the usual processes of decay, scavenging, and disintegration is by means of quick burial in aqueous sediments. And a lot of times, the evolutionists will sneak it in there. Catastrophic event. Wait a minute. I thought this was uniformitarianism. Not in this case. Comparatively few remains of organisms now inhabiting the Earth are being deposited under conditions favorable for their preservation as fossils. It is nevertheless remarkable that so vast a number of fossils are embedded in the rocks. William J. Miller. That the rock formations of the Earth are veritably rich in fossils is a fact hard to reconcile with the paucity of potential fossils being formed under present conditions. Yeah, I thought the present is a view of the past, but we got nothing formed. Geologists sometimes speak of the incompleteness of the fossil record, but this is only because of the absence of the anticipated missing links in the supposed evolutionary sequences of development. There is an abundance of fossils known of all kinds of creatures. Particularly, practically all modern families and most genera are represented in the fossil record, as well as great numbers of extinct creatures. An outstanding Swedish scientist, late director of the Botanical Institute at Lund, Sweden, says, "It has been argued that the series of paleontological finds is too intermittent, too full of missing links, to serve as a convincing proof. If a postulated ancestral type is not found, it is simply stated that it has not so far been found." Darwin himself often used this argument, and in his time it was perhaps justifiable. But many years have gone by. Where are they? Not there. But it has lost its value through the immense layers and advances of paleobiology in the 20th century, and now the 21st and the 22nd. The true situation is that these fossils